Thank you to all the participants, and given the time, I will not get into detail. So please, can you come to the front here on the table, our ambassador of the Netherlands in Mexico, Wilfred Mohr, please. Javier Arribas Quintana, again, the Minister of the Green Agenda of the Delegation of European Union, Ariadna Salvatierra García, Director of Water Projects of GZ, and Elko Schoder, expert on cooperation affairs of European Union. Before I introduce them, I would like to talk a little bit about the panel. We will be now focusing on this vision on international cooperation for the sustainable management on water focus and solutions. What we would like to hear, how the collaboration between countries, international organisms, among others, are collaborating to truly see how we can make this issue about water something universal, because we know that water is indeed a universal issue, and from our side we need to fight against its unprotection. The ambassador of Netherlands in Mexico, Wilfred Mohr, has been here since 2020. He's graduated from the Groningen University with a business economics focus. She has had a lot of postings in Norway, Afghanistan, and Hong Kong. She has worked on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Haya, and he's an inspector as well. I introduce again Javier, and Ariadna Salvatierra studied international relations in Universidad de las Américas in Puebla, with sciences in environment in Edinburgh, in Scotland, with more than 15 years working with forest conservation in order to support people, working for more than a decade in technical cooperation in Germany, and now with GZ and water. And lastly, we have Mirco Schoder, that is part of the delegation of the European Union. He works in the management of different projects in this wide portfolio of transportation, water, energy, and environment. He's specialized in and has a master's degree in PhD in international affairs and more than 15 years of experience working on GC organizations, among others. So again, I would like to start with our intervention of the ambassador, who will be talking a little bit about how things in Netherlands work, and thanking again from Pronatura Mexico, given that we had the opportunity that Kathy could come to that beautiful country to learn much more regarding water, the data, among others. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to talk about my country and the connection between my country and water, because as you already know, the Netherlands identity is well connected with water, because it's about surviving, right? If we do not manage water in a good way, we cannot survive in Holland, because third part of the country is under water level, and 2/3 of the country are floods. So we need to work every day in order to survive from water. We've done it building different settlements. We did it for decades, and not only for protecting ourselves against the sea, but also the rivers, because waters comes from Sweden, from Germany, from France in a huge amount, especially in spring, when the snow from the Alps, from the mountains, melts down, and the water comes from these countries before going to the North Sea. So it is a very important measure for us to protect ourselves, but also we need to improve and widening the pumping stations for bringing water outside the country. And by climate change, we have changed our practices, because to increase the settlements from 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters is not sustainable at the end. We need to have other appliances and other measures and other innovations in order to ensure the country at the end. And one of these measures, it's a program called Loom for the Rivers, and it's to widen the space in the rivers in the times of where there's a lot of water in the seasons, like on spring, for example, when the water comes up, because there's a lot of snow coming from France and Germany and Sweden. So we need to increase the space in these rivers so the levels can be increased, but the space enlarges at the end. And those are some measures that we are taking. And what is also important for us, technology and innovation are important, but the most important one is governance. That's the work between the different ministries. In Netherlands, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture and Water, but also the Ministry of Finances, because obviously all these actions cost a lot of money, and we have a council, a ministry council managing water on a federal level in Holland, but also the states and municipalities are participating in this exercise because at the end they are worked on a local way that these measures have to be implemented. And it's part of the governance. And another part of the governance is the cooperation between the governments, the institutions, like universities, technical institutions for sciences, and the private sector. And this is a type of cooperation that is fundamental as well, because as the previous speaker was saying, if there's not a correct governance and if there's no cooperation between different institutions and entities, and if people work in an isolated manner, we will not be able to achieve solutions in a sustainable way in a long term. So that's the message that I would like to transmit. It's about governance at the end. And for example, last year in New York, we organized an event on water during the water conference by the UN. And we organized a workshop with participants at a municipal, local, and state level in Mexico. There are people from Mexico that have meetings before, and that's amazing. People from states and the federation that have never ever met before in meetings or encounters. And given that we organized this event in New York, people get to know each other. For me, that's very surprising. I mean, this thing, because the cooperation is fundamental. So I will stop right there, and so we can talk a little bit more about this in detail. Thank you, Ambassador. And
Javier, no sé si gustarías igual compartir algo de parte de la delegación de la... Perfecto, entonces pasamos a Ariadna Salvatierra.
Okay, so Ariadna Salvatierra, the director of the GEC Water Projects. We thank you on behalf of ProNatura. We have been sharing a lot with you, and within this framework, we give you the floor. Can you please show the presentation? Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone watching online as well. And I would like to start talking about the importance of the water importance for GEC. You're going to see some images now. So that's going to be like the map of all the projects on water that we have as GEC in the world. Since 2009, this German corporation started having a portfolio in water issues. And in 2023, there were more than 100 projects around the world related to water, and a portfolio of about 130 million euros. So this means a lot. It gives a lot of importance to everything that we do at GIC. In Mexico, we have been working with water issues for more than 10 years, federal, municipal, or state work. We work on mitigation, adaptation, sanitation, and water governance. We started more to get into gray infrastructure, strengthening that. I work with a cruise project that Gonzalo was referring to, or projects focused in strengthening the NDCs in Mexico. And we have been making a lot of progress, and currently we are working more in things related to green infrastructure. This is some of the impact and products that came from the past, more focused on the gray part, strengthening with companies and also strengthening infrastructure. This is, for example, a tool that assesses the carbon footprint and the energy performance of companies. So what is the current focus for us? We have been transitioning more into green infrastructure, as Paola explained, the difference between both of them. And now, as the ambassador says, we are working more on governance and governance and governance. And water governance is something relevant for us. Conservation measures for soil and water, and cooperation with the private sector that was mentioned in the previous panel, that has been of great importance for us. We can see what's the current portfolio. Well, we currently have these 3 projects: Aguas Firmes, Resilient, Cumbres, and Alianza Climática 4, that cover the water topic in different from different perspectives. Aguas Firmes is a public and private association, and it's private also from Grupo Mohr. The purpose is to improve the sustainability of the aquifers of Calera and Apan, where they have 2 plants. And basically, how do we do it? Through conservation, agriculture, governance, solutions based on nature, monitoring, and financial inclusion. We work in these 2 states, Zacatecas and Hidalgo. And why would I like to focus on this one? Because this is a project that works together with the private sector. And what has been one of the greatest challenges? Public opinion of people not wanting to get involved in the private sector, when it should be the other way around. They should be involved because it's their responsibility as well. How are they going to participate in a better way when they are well informed and working together with others? And that's what we are doing in this project of Aguas Firmes. Bring the private sector to the table together with the different levels of the government, federal level with Zacatecas, and even with other bodies like Chiapas, bringing them all together to the table and see what are those governance structures that are more efficient. For many years, we worked on a basin level. We had different councils. For Aguas Firmes, we are more focused on working with a governance system on an aquifer level, because it's closer to us, because the stakeholders know each other, who's on the table, who's consuming the water. They know each other, they are closer, and it's easier to work together to get to those solutions. So that is what we are doing in Aguas Firmes, in Cumbres Resilientes. We are working more from finding solutions oriented in nature and with a focus on climate change and measures for adaptation based on ecosystems in the states of Querétaro, San Luis Potosí, Guanajuato, and Nuevo León. We are looking for those financial mechanisms that will allow us to improve. It's not easy to have new mechanisms because each state, each municipality, each place is different. The mechanism for taking the funds to a local level, does it work? or maybe it doesn't even exist. Sometimes it doesn't even exist. So we're working on that. It's a project that is starting, well, it's around halfway. We're still looking for solutions, working with different stakeholders, and Climate Alliance 4 is more focused on a national level with the support of capacity development for CONAGUA, for increasing knowledge on adaptation and mitigation to climate change. This was the water context. We already talked about this before. It's not the only system, Cutzamala, that is not doing well. On a national level, that's the situation for everyone with really low levels in general. That's a landscape in the country and the world, except for Scotland and the Netherlands that has a lot of rain. So public policy recommendations that we have on the table after all of this experience that we have accumulated for Mexico. Basically, we have three different topics that we need is necessary to approach: governance and updating the structures on a different scale. As I said, the councils, the basin councils, maybe we still lack this assessment that Mario was referring to. Sometimes we say, I am being assessed, and we get scared. But if we don't get assessed, how can we improve? So assessing structures and updating them on a different scale. Does the basin level work, or is it better an aquifer? What is the scale required to retake the OCDE's principles? Juan Carlos Valencia, a consultant, talks about the three I's. He mentions information, incidents, and inclusion. And I say intersectorial because how much does the agricultural sector spend in water? In Mexico, it's 70%. And from that 70%, 50% is wasted. So intersectorial, it's a key concept, as well as the other I's, information. I would like to focus on that one as well. Something that has already been discussed here is increasing the level of information. Mario was talking about monitoring, and that's one of the challenges that we have been facing here. Each person is measuring one bit, and the monitoring systems in the country are very reduced. There's not a lot of investment in the infrastructure for measurement. So we need to increase the information through monitoring for decision making and to take it to those governance structures for decision making. When it comes to financial mechanisms, we have to work together with the private sector and civil society for getting resources, which is essential for increasing the investment in green and gray infrastructure. That's also necessary. Promoting payment schemes for water services on different scales and modalities. 15 years ago, I was doing my master's degree, and I remember the case study of Zapanilamera and Jalapa with the payment for environmental and water services. And for any reason, now it's not working so well. So what can we recover from all of these success cases? So promoting this payment for environmental services, it could be one way. Updating of the approach on climate change, on things related to water. We're still behind that. The general law for water has not been updated for 15 years. I'm updating the governance structures for water. I was mentioning that. also strengthening and monitoring and how it feeds the decisions, for example, for concessions, which actions will be implemented and these great large plans so we can restore and or what other types of actions we can do. I think that was the last slide. And very importantly, and last but not least, what are the German institutions working in water things? We have IKI. IKI works focused on climate change and some other water topics. They've had two large moments where they opened their a call by country or by topic. And we have the IKI small grant that open more regularly, and in those times you can apply, or the institutions from civil society can approach them in a lower scale. We have this initiative, the Urban Water Catalyst Initiative, together with the government of the Netherlands. It just opened a year ago, and it is more focused in sanitation. That's another initiative that has joint efforts from the government of Germany and the Netherlands. And finally, the German Water Partnership. That's an association of German companies that work around the world. And they have a special chapter for Latin America to see which companies are doing exchanges, experiences, capacity development, and they focus on the private sector. Thank you very much. That would be it. Thank you. Thank you, Ariadna, for providing that information about GIC and different projects. Now we give the floor to Javier, who's going to be talking more about water and the EU. Hello again. Thank you, Regina. Thank you to my colleagues, Mirco, Ariadna, and the ambassador for joining. We know that your agenda is very complex, just like with any ambassador. Gautier Millon, the ambassador of the European Union, couldn't be here because he left the country. So from the EU, we have my colleague Mirco, myself, to talk about what we do in Europe. I'm going to spend only 5 minutes. I hope I don't take more time because I already did a presentation back in Merida. That presentation is available if you can show it to me now so we can remember what is being done in the EU. Just very briefly. And then we're going to get more into the detail of what we are foreseeing to do with Mexico when it comes to water. Is a presentation ready? Well, water is essential in Mexico, but it's fundamental in Europe as well. So many years ago, many decades ago, we started working on legislation and establishing coherent policies, coordinated policies. As the ambassador says, it's important to coordinate in a region like Europe, where we have 27 member countries and several basins that are part of different countries. They cross borders. Maybe in Switzerland, we see the snow and then the water runs through the valleys and it covers like 4 or 5 countries. So most rivers are binational. Spain and Portugal share basins. And we need to be able to manage that. That's why governance, it's important because you require a lot of coordination and coherent governance. I'm gonna go very briefly. I already presented this in Merida. I just wanted to say that water is essential, it's cross-cutting. As Paula said, it's a resource and it's a public good that touches everyone. In the EU, we try to give more coherence to it and to see it in a most cross-cutting way in the Green European Pact, where we see many of the strategies that are already being implemented when it comes to energy and values and circular economy, sustainable economy, and water always comes to play because water is energy, water is forest, water is food, water is everything, water is life. So in all of these sectors, we can see water. Mario said that in Europe, we do things in the best way. Thank you for that. We just do things. We try to do our best, but we have a lot of issues as well. And water is a severe problem in Europe. We know that water stress affects 20% of the European territory and 30% of the population each year, and it is increasing. Although all the strategies and policies are in place, as well as the legislation, this is happening in Europe. So we're not exempt from this problem. In Europe, we need to have clarity about the fact that we have a lot of geographical diversity that makes water availability per capita to be very diverse. We have countries like Malta, that is a really small country in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's just a rock. The availability of water per inhabitant is 170 cubic meters, or like Norway or Switzerland that have 70,000 per capita. So evidently we see a different diversity there that requires different types of solutions. We can see that in the past years, the availability of water per capita has been decreased in different countries. So the water problem is there. And certain countries, especially on the south, are suffering more from scarcity or by flood, because flooding can also be a really problematic thing. There were really terrible floods in Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg that caused a lot of issues, and this is recurring. We need to be able to manage that. Climate change, urbanization, tourism, and the changes in the use of soil, water, agricultural exploitation, that accelerates the water problem. So we have here the universe of different rules, regulations, legislation. I'm not going to get into that. We have the Drinking Water Directive that establishes water as a public good, and for that reason we should be protecting it. So there's a series of legislations and regulations that talk about drinking water, coastal water, marine water, wastewater, contamination with nitrates. In my town of 150,000 inhabitants in Castilla, we didn't have water because it was a lot of nitrate in the water. So these are all the different European legislations. This framework, as I said, this is like the main law. It defines water as a commercial good, but also as a public good that should be recovered, and establishes a series of provisions. One which is very important is the obligation of establishing water plans by basin. And this is essential when it comes to governance. You need a comprehensive focus through the rain basins. As I said, they are in different countries, so you require a lot of coordination. And water is essential in our strategy for climate change adaptation. And I'm not gonna refer to all the strategies, but there's like some bullet points there that tell you a little bit about where we want to head if we want to provide a good and coherent strategy for water management and adaptation to climate change. For example, the price of water, it should be just, mechanisms for assignation of water, and improving the mechanisms to face droughts, floods, technology, investment in infrastructure, improvement in knowledge and data collection, etc. So basically, in a nutshell, that is the context of the water policy on a European level. Of course, that we have this problem with water that is affecting our partners as well. And we want to contribute as much as we can by contributing with our knowledge, our technology, and that is why we are trying to cooperate with our partners, especially with Mexico. In terms of water, on November of 2022, we presented a document of cooperation in the Chamber of Deputies. The event was hosted by Deputy Marcela Guerra Castillo, which I think she's the president of the chamber, and we presented a series of guidelines and things that could be done as a cooperation between Mexico and the EU. Mexico having these terrible problems, and the fact that 47% of water is wasted because it's lost. There's 22 million Mexicans that have no access to this universal good, which is water, drinking water, 20 million. Or they do not have access to sanitation systems, 28 million of them. In Mexico, we have a lot of plants, treatment plants that do not work, 50%. There's a lot of things to do. And that's why we have Mirco here to talk to us a little bit about our vision for the future, what we want to do, and how we cooperate with the Mexican authorities. Thank you. Thank you, Mirco. Go ahead. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with the ambassador, with Javier, with Mrs. Salvatierra. It's difficult to be in a panel of experts when I'm the new guy. At least in Mexico, I have been here for only 3 months, but I have been working in water programs in Central America. And since I got here, I was facing the presidential elections and also the water issue. So water and the heat waves have been important. When you get to the country, you notice, and it's a priority. I work in the direction of the international partnerships that we have, or the delegation of the EU here in Mexico, and also in other delegations around the world. We support with projects in different sectors like transportation, sustainable agriculture, and in the future, energy and water. So I shouldn't talk too much about the past, but I hope that I can contribute with some ideas for the future. We work in close coordination with the member states, the 27, and also here with the Netherlands, also Austria, and other implementing agencies of the member states. So we are just exploring the water sector now to see how we can contribute in the most efficient way for Mexico in the future. I want to also get to know more about you, how you live, how you use water. I have some questions for you as well. The first one is, who of you has 24/7 water availability? Please raise your hand. Like 90%. So it's not a good representation, I think. But it's available, right? And the second question is, who of you leaves the water running when you do the dishes? Do you keep it on when you're doing the dishes? Raise your hand.
Sin pena.
Don't be ashamed. And the last question, raise your hand if you don't pay for water. I'm sure you have a good reason, right? So it's not a good representation, however. I wanted to talk about these things that we have been dealing with these past months. We have found authorities from different states, Conagua. So the main thing here is water service and water treatment. The loss of water around 50%. I think it's surprising. I get surprised to see, and also in other countries in Latin America, I see that in the Netherlands, in Germany, we have like 1% of loss of water, which is not a good reference. And logically, water management is important for us. So we are looking at which projects we can work with, preferably infrastructure. We are looking for alliances with the private sector, logically with the Mexican authorities on different levels, federal, state, municipality. Also, this talking about service is essential, and we have received requests of really mega projects about, well, infrastructure is necessary, but also we have to keep in mind that 50% of the water is not getting to the people. A lot of economical problems, and they have a lot of cost, and prices here, I think, are very low when it comes to charging for water. So I think that my main takeaway of this encounter is to focus the large picture of water management and governance. And as EU, we can contribute in different sectors like infrastructure, and for that also financial support that can provide credits and investment, also for the local authorities and other organisms like Banobras, but essentially this is just one part for water management. If we focus on infrastructure, we should not forget about all the other challenges that we have. And I think that this workshop is very important because it provides an overview, the large picture, which is very important and very complicated. So if I tell you about other countries in Central America, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So I've seen the plans that you have presented for Guatemala, Mario and Paola. So where to start in this large universe of actions that are necessary? And how can we contribute from our own corners, financing? That's essential, but it's also like the part that sometimes it's blank and undefined, and without defining that, we won't have any success working in a comprehensive management without financing. So our focus for the next months is to find alliances with local authorities that I also see here present. And I feel that we can establish a closer communication with them because they are essential for that, and they cannot be absent. They have to be leaders of these decisions, and also in coordination with private companies of European origin, where there's possibility of investment.
There are companies that work treatment plants with residual and with waste and fresh water, and I have seen that they've been reducing for different reasons. But in the future, these plants, if they are transferred to municipal authorities, in such cases, we have to ensure that they have the same capacities, the financing for its maintenance of these plants, and to guarantee that the water that is extracted to be available in the basin. So we are talking a lot about sustainable usage of water, but what does it mean for America? What does it mean to have sustainable water? That if you can only extract as much as possible to regenerate, and this is not controlled by anyone. There's no monitoring. The research component, the component that makes the basis lines, that it's very essential, and a lot of work, not only here in Mexico, maybe in Europe, and we are leaders in this aspect. And I mean, with the one that was presented by Javier, with the guideline of the water framework that is being implemented, maybe on the 2000s and something, 2003, I think. Probably it's not, or it hasn't been the best solution, but without that guideline, it could have been even worse, the situation regarding water in Europe, because these measures are basic for guaranteeing for the resources, and even more with a strong impact on the climate change and energy on the plants, where they all work in jointly in its implementation on different sectors. And that's what I hope we can support from Europe and to Mexico in the next months, years, logically, in the following years, to define where we can work jointly in the following years and implement projects together. Thank you. Well, thank you very much to the 4 speakers. I understand that because we're a little bit short in time, if we have some final words, passing the floor, and then we're going to go to a small recess. We are one hour delayed, but maybe we can stretch our legs a little bit more, even also the people online. So we will take the next segment at 1. So please, Ambassador. Yeah, I talked a lot about the situation in Holland, but I think it's interesting as well to join what we're doing here in Mexico. And we work mainly with the states. For example, in the Mexico state, in Jalisco, Tlaxcala, Oaxaca, Nuevo León, and in 2 weeks we'll go to Coahuila. The government in Coahuila have invited us to a workshop regarding water, so we will see if we can work with them as well, and what kind of solutions they can offer by their states. First is to solve pollution on the rivers because they are very polluted, and the solutions that they can offer in water treatment in order to improve the quality of water on the rivers, but also in our agricultural sector to work with states to see how they can modernize the agriculture system by using less water, for example. And also some cities, for example, Jalisco, will work to improve the urban water system. In the system of pipes and tanks is not quite sustainable, so it needs a lot of resources, but it's necessary because there's a regulation on not using pipes and internal systems. And also, like in Oaxaca, we built a captation system for rainwater, of how it comes, the water get lost in 2 or 3 hours. So there are captation systems using this water after 100 days, which is a good thing as well. We signed an agreement on an institution in Holland for a water council to see how we can monitor and govern all these cooperation between Mexico and Netherlands. We have good liaisons with Armenian organizations of the private sector that are active on water. And a topic that is very important here, and it's practically impossible to solve, is the payment system. Who pays for water and how much they can pay, and that they understood that 70% of the water was used in the agricultural sector, and they almost don't pay for this water in a system that it's not sustainable as well. So a lot of work in a lot of states, and we finally have a coalition that it's called Dutch Sustainable Growth Coalition, with 8 companies from the Netherlands. Some of them have plants here in Mexico, and they have a lot of best practices of how they can reuse water, recycle water, reduce its management of water. Heineken, for example, it has very well advanced in this topic. I think that the most effective plant, the most sustainable in the world, it's here in Miyaki in the north, close to Mexicali. So they work a lot to reduce and to reuse water. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. I don't know if somebody else would like to take the microphone. If not, well, I would like to share a little bit about this panel. We heard about different perspectives regarding regulation, the European area, governance around the world, but specifically here pointed out to Mexico and the necessity for financial mechanisms to rescue success cases and to bring government structures to the basins. Check all the geography issues. What does it mean? What do we have as infrastructure? How we can improve and how we can go forward.